NAIRU is one of those economic policies that not a lot of people know about. Whenever I mention it, I get a lot of questions, but there's not a free and easy explainer for it that I can find anywhere on the internet. So I guess we'll do one now. This is a policy that ruins the entire economy, in my opinion. NAIRU is an acronym for Non-Accelerating Inflationary Rate of Unemployment. They make these policies sound really boring, so we don't look into them too much, but it's not as complicated as it sounds. Basically, the Federal Reserve decides that there is a magic number where unemployment rates must stay for inflation to not be an issue in the economy. The theory is that if they drop below this number, prices are going to start to go up because too many people are employed, so they're going to go out and buy things, and then demand will be up, so therefore prices will be up. I would say maybe we could consider that if more people are working, so less people are unemployed, they're making stuff at their jobs, and so productivity goes up as well, supply goes up to meet the increased demand. The Federal Reserve does not see it this way. So what does the Federal Reserve do? When the unemployment rates drop below this number, they decide it's time to raise interest rates. Similarly, if inflation goes up, they will raise interest rates for the same reason, all because of this policy. The policy works like this. The Federal Reserve raises interest rates, so it becomes more expensive for banks to get money. That means banks will raise the price, the interest rate on their loans and mortgages. It becomes more expensive for the public to borrow money. And so then less people will do it. Less people will invest in businesses and start new ones. There will be less economic activity. There will be less jobs. And so then less people will have money to go out and spend in the economy. Demand will go down. Prices will go down. Except there is no data to support the impact of interest rates actually reduces inflation. And so they've been relying on this logic for so long when there's no economic data to prove it actually works to get inflation down.
So I kind of wanted to dig in today with you a little bit about this relationship between unemployment rates and inflation. In early 2014, the Federal Reserve believed that the long-run unemployment rate was around 5.4%. In early 2018, it was estimated that this was now around 4.5%. Now the estimate is around 4.2%. What is the current unemployment rate today?
3.7%.
3.7%. So what we had previously thought of, perhaps as far back as 2014, as a long-run unemployment rate is around 5.4%. What we're currently experiencing is 3.7, lower than that estimate. But unemployment has fallen about 3 full points since 2014, but inflation is no higher today than it was 5 years ago. Given these facts, do you think it's possible that the Fed's estimates of the lowest sustainable unemployment rate may have been too high?
Absolutely.
So we overshot in what our long-run unemployment rate is.
I think we've learned, as you pointed out, that you can't identify, this is something you can't identify directly. I think we've learned that it's lower than we thought, substantially lower than we thought.
I would argue the unemployment rate can be zero. Everyone can be employed and inflation is not a problem. I think they have a different reason for keeping this policy in place. We'll get into that in a bit. In any case, the Federal Reserve is getting this really important number wrong, and it has a high consequence of people not putting food on their table, not making their mortgage payments. And it's all because of this arbitrary number. And you might be thinking, well, the Federal Reserve is full of really smart people who've probably done the calculation and figured out, this number is really important and we're just trying to keep inflation in check, and it would be much worse if we didn't set this target and keep interest rates so high. You might be thinking that. I don't think that's the case, because former Fed Governor Daniel Tarullo admitted that the Fed has no working theory of inflation. Similarly, people have argued that these models of the relationship between interest rates, unemployment, and inflation are unproven, if not unprovable.
I've been seeing lately that economists are increasingly worried that the idea of a Phillips curve that links unemployment and inflation is no longer describing what is happening in today's economy. Have you been considering on that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, very much so. We spend a great deal of time on that. The connection between slack in the economy, or the level of unemployment, and inflation was very strong if you go back 50 years, and it's gotten weaker and weaker and weaker to the point where it's a faint heartbeat that you can hear now. It's still there. You can see it at state level data and things like that. But I think we really have learned, though, that the economy can sustain much lower unemployment than we thought without troubling levels of inflation. And I think I would look at today's level of unemployment as well within the range of potential estimates, of plausible estimates of what the natural rate of unemployment is.
The part that's wrong, really, is not the fact that people will be unemployed as a result of raising interest rates. It is true that less people will take out a loan if taking out a loan is more expensive. That's pretty simple and straightforward. The part that doesn't really make sense is inflation going down. It turns out when corporations see that the public is willing to pay a high price for a good, that tends to stick in a lot of these cases. And so our regular mechanism for managing inflation is wrong. Now, it's not like the Federal Reserve is not run by people who know this. They know this. They know that this doesn't work. They know that their magic number for where unemployment needs to stay to keep inflation in check is not so magical.
Chair Powell, will gas prices go down as a result of your interest rate increase?
I would not think so, no.
Okay. That matters because gas prices are one of the single biggest drivers of inflation. Energy prices overall drove a third of the inflation last month, but the Fed's tools, as you say, have no impact here. So let's look at another necessity, food. Price of groceries is up nearly 12% this year. Americans feel the pinch. No matter how much groceries cost, people still got to eat. Chair Powell, will the Fed's interest rate increases bring food prices down for families?
I wouldn't say so, no.
Okay. So a Fed increase won't bring down these prices.
Before Jerome Powell came before the United States and said, oh, COVID inflation is a major problem. We're raising interest rates. We're raising interest rates. We're raising interest rates. Back in 2019, on the floor of Congress, he said that the relationship between unemployment and inflation is not being observed in the data anymore.
We've observed in the past that there has been some type of relationship in previous years between inflation rates and unemployment rates. As unemployment goes way down, more jobs, there's pressure on wages and salaries and so forth. Is there a new paradigm out there as far as evaluating this today, and is it because of the global economy, or what is it? Because we have low unemployment, but we have, at the moment, not a lot of pressure from your testimony and what we observe on inflation.
So the relationship between slack in the economy, or unemployment, and inflation was a strong one 50 years ago. If you remember that in the 60s, there was a close correlation there, and that has gone away, and it's really been
But we had a different economy then, did we not?
Very different economy in so many ways. And in this way, that really, I would say that period, at least 20 years ago, that period was over, and the relationship between unemployment and inflation became weak. It's become weaker and weaker and weaker. In addition to that, I think we're learning that interest rates, that the neutral interest rate is lower than we had thought. And I think we're learning that the natural rate of unemployment is lower than we thought. So monetary policy hasn't been as accommodative as we had thought. So I think we're learning all of those things. At the end of the day, there has to be a connection, because low unemployment will drive wages up, and ultimately higher wages will drive inflation, but we haven't reached that point. And in any case, that connection between the two is quite small these days.
If there is not a strong connection between unemployment and inflation, why are we raising interest rates to reduce employment and therefore reduce inflation?
According to the Fed's own report, if you continue raising interest rates as you plan, unemployment will be 4.6% by the end of the year, more than a full point higher than it is today. Chair Powell, if you hit your projections, do you know how many people who are currently working, going about their lives, will lose their jobs?
I don't have that number in front of me. I will say it's not
it's
an
just a math
intended
problem.
consequence. It's
Well,
not.
but it is, and it's in your report, and that would be about 2 million people who would lose their jobs, people who are working right now, making their mortgages.
You'll hear Jerome Powell talk about the Fed's dual mandate a lot. That's their obligation to maintain steady prices, so a 2% target of inflation, and maximum employment. The one tool they have to achieve that is raising or lowering interest rates. As economist James Galbraith put this, it would be like driving a car where the one tool you have is just putting your foot increasingly or easing up on the gas pedal. There's a lot of other things that go into driving a car. For example, brakes. For example, steering, changing gears, engine maintenance, tire rotations, getting new tires, adjusting your mirrors. I think that's a useful analogy. I would take it a step further and say that because that's our only mechanism we use for driving the car, that is why the car always crashes. That is why we have regular crashes in our economy.
You could actually tip this economy into recession. So I just want to say, you know what's worse than high inflation and low unemployment? It's high inflation and a recession with millions of people out of work. And I hope you'll reconsider that as you drive this, before you drive this economy off a cliff. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So let's think, if this is not really working to achieve its intended goal as a policy, why do they keep doing it? Why would the elites of our country decide to employ this policy if it's not doing much to make the economy good for people? Who is it making the economy good for, if not the masses? When the Fed raises rates, there are less jobs available. Think about what was happening at the beginning of COVID. Workers were suddenly essential. We relied on them to survive. We saw a huge bloom in union organizing in the United States and a positive view from the public of unions. When more people are unemployed as a result of high interest rates or for any reason, there's more competition for jobs. People want to hang on to whatever job they can get, and so they're willing to take a job for less wages, less benefits. They're less likely to cause a stir at work and try and organize a union or ask for a raise. And so in a situation where there's high competition for jobs by employees, you're going to see workers getting less and workers organizing less. That means companies have higher profit margins. They're paying out less money in wages and benefits. So, by raising interest rates, this makes the economy better for employers, for corporations, who, if we all remember, had record profits during the COVID era. They were raising prices, and they were not raising wages and increasing benefits in proportion to how much they were raising prices at the store. This created the conditions for a huge wealth transfer from the working class to the richest people in the entire world. And I remember one instance in August 2022 where Jerome Powell admitted this out loud.
In the middle of this is a labor market in the United States where people can get paid well. It's too hot. You know, it's unsustainably hot, but notwithstanding that, it's a very, very good labor market for workers. And it's our job to get it into a better place.
And so the issue of NAIRU is that this is constant. This is not just something that comes into play during periods of high inflation. They will regularly maintain a level of unemployment that they think is necessary to keep the economy stable, as they put it. This is literally a policy that builds unemployment, joblessness, into the American economy. And let's not forget that the way we measure unemployment is extremely undercounting. Unemployed people are people who do not have a job out of everyone who's been currently looking for one in the past 4 weeks. So if someone gives up out of desperation and pursues alternative avenues of survival, they're not counted anymore. This also doesn't count people who are just looking for part-time work because they gave up on the possibility of getting a full-time job. What does this mean about the US economy as a system, right? What is an economy for? I would say it's a system that allows people in a society to organize to meet their material needs. It's the mechanism for that. And so if people intentionally cannot meet their material needs, and that's baked into the system as an explicit constant policy, then it's a failing economy. I would say. It doesn't work for everyone, especially the people that are seen as expendable. One morning, I was talking to Warren Mosler, a very well-known economist, former manager of major financial institutions, and we're talking about what it means that unemployment is such a constant in America thanks to NAIRU and the Federal Reserve and how we do monetary policy. And what we landed on was, this is probably, not constitutional in some way. There's a promise in this country to have the pursuit of happiness as an American, and the government promises to promote the general welfare. Having a policy that keeps people intentionally unemployed is doing precisely the opposite of that. It's demoting the general welfare. It just doesn't sit right with me. And the other crazy part about this is when interest rates go up, we see a higher return on treasury bonds. Now, when the federal government issues debt, when they decide we're going to spend more than we are bringing in revenue and taxes, we're going to grow the economy by increasing the amount of dollars out there, they sell bonds. Who buys bonds? The richest people in our entire society, people who can afford to just let their money sit there and turn into more money. And so by increasing interest rates during these periods where people are going to be unemployed, it's an additional direct cash transfer to the wealthiest people in our country by the federal government, by them deciding to pay interest on the additional dollars they're putting into the economy. You know what? We're going to grow the economy a little bit, and an added bonus for the richest people in the entire world. You're welcome. Yeah, that's how it works. And I would argue that the secondary bond market is inflationary because you can purchase a bond at a high interest rate and then go on and sell it. So then you have all of this new cash that you can go on and spend. The zero coupon bond market should be criminal, in my view. You shouldn't be able to say, yes, thank you, I would like to invest this money, and then say, hey guy, I have this bond. It's going to be worth X amount of dollars in 10 or 15 years. How about I sell it to you and promise to give you that, and you just give me, 4% on what I put in? That happens all the time. And I think there's probably a minor inflationary risk with that amount of money, because it's going to people who have so much money they don't really need to immediately spend it on consumer goods and increased demand and therefore inflation. But it is an absolute wealth transfer and capital transfer to the richest people in the country. And so I think, the secondary bond market should be illegal. I don't think the U.S. government should issue treasuries for every dollar they put into the economy that's new. That's a whole other thing. In any case, I don't like this policy of intentionally keeping people jobless in the economy, but it's a very real one, and it's one that they maintain, I think, to keep the labor market quiet, to prevent workers from coming to power in the United States and realizing, hey, all of this would collapse if we didn't show up one day, right? That they are essential, that they are necessary, that if they had organized unions and demanded power in their workplace, things would be different. I think the wealthiest people in the country don't want to share, and it's as simple as that. They're afraid of a world where working people have power on like a societal level. They think less of working people. As someone who grew up in the working class, I've seen it. I've experienced people in very high places talk about regular working people as if we are collectively dumber because of how we grew up and the life we live. And people like my family are some of the smartest people I've ever met, so I know that's all ridiculous. However, very real. People think like that. And I think on the other front, they like having all of their yachts, they like having all of their money, they like that their money gives them a lot of power in our society, and they want to hang on to that. Now, this idea that there's a population of people that are always unemployed, always looking for work, had been described by an economist in 1867. He called this the Industrial Reserve Army. And this is when industrial society and capitalism was very new that he wrote this. He said, if a surplus laboring population is a necessary product of accumulation or the development of wealth on a capitalist basis, the surplus population becomes, conversely, the lever of capitalistic accumulation. Nay, a condition of existence of the capitalist mode of production. It forms a disposable industrial reserve army that belongs to capital quite as absolutely as if the latter had bred it at its own cost. Independently of the limits of the actual increase of population, it creates, for the changing needs of self-expansion of capital, a mass of human material always ready for exploitation. So this is an economist at the beginning of capitalism and industrialization, very accurately describing an economic principle that still exists today. And that economist was Karl Marx. So maybe don't dismiss one of the most well-known economists in the entire world. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Down with NAIRU. Tell your friends. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. And for more videos like this, make sure you're getting updates from the Econ For The People playlist. Thank you. I love you. Bye.